Hello everyone, welcome back to another Project Gladiator weather forecast. Today is going to be a weekly overlook for this week, but for today we have a slight risk set up for western Kansas, as well as down through the Oklahoma Panhandle, through the northern Texas Panhandle, as well as another large marginal threat that we've been seeing a lot of this week, going all the way from Mexico to central or southern North Dakota. As for our threats today, we don't really have all that much of a tornado threat. However, we do have a 15% wind threat on a 5% wind threat, with a 15% hail threat on a 5% hail threat. Moving on to our pivotal weather models, still focusing on today, we have a low pressure system that is moving along the Pacific coast right here. It is funneling the jet stream to go further up north through the Kansas and Nebraska, the northern plains area, which is going to trigger severe weather for much of that area for the next 3 days. Because of how weak this jet stream is, wind shear is likely going to be very little and likely going to cause absolutely no tornado threat for the next few days. In fact, the rest of the week, tornadoes are going to be very, very small potential. The only days that we could possibly see tornadoes with sufficient wind shear is on Thursday and Friday. Taking a look at our moisture in the atmosphere over the next few days, moisture is expected to continue to increase across much of the Midwest, but for today, we have dew points that are mostly in the mid-50s to the 60s in some areas, but for the slight risk in question, it's mostly in the 60s to mid-50s, not really a whole lot in the 60s, so this is going to help contribute to instability. That moisture, alongside these strong lapse rates for much of the slight risk area throughout here, with lapse rates in the 8s, is going to help contribute to moderate instability, likely in the 1000s range to the 250s, because dew points are not really all that strong. They're mostly in the mid-50s. And then taking a look at our instability, focusing on the slight risk area, you can see that we get exactly that. We get instability in the 1000s range to the 2000s range and 2050s range, and that is expected to stay lingering for a while. As well as further up north, we're going to have increasing instability from today and tomorrow as well. With today, Cape values in the 2000s, the upper 2000s even, and then for tomorrow we get simulated Cape values that are going to be in the 3000s, upper 3000s, and possibly even the 4000s in Nebraska. These Cape values are likely going to help contribute to the possibility of some large hail for not only today, but for tomorrow as well. But then taking a look at wind shear, as I said earlier, I'm not really expecting a whole lot of wind shear for the Midwest, but let's take a look at it anyways to show you guys an example of how we're not going to get a whole lot of wind shear with a weak mid-level flow. Taking a look at much of the area, we have pretty much little to no wind shear. However, there are some small patches like right here and right here where we could see the possibility of some brief rotating supercells and possibly a brief funnel cloud. But then let's move on to weather for the rest of the week. So I did mention earlier about the low pressure system that is making its way down along the Pacific coast. This is expected to, again, funnel the jet stream up north with this high pressure system blocking it, forcing it upwards to the northern reaches of the Midwest. But as the low pressure system continues along the Pacific coast, it gets closer around Thursday. Strong mid-level winds or sufficient mid-level winds should bring the possibility of some sufficient wind shear for tornadic development around Thursday and Friday. But then after that, by Saturday, that low pressure system really just digs in with cyclonic rotation. However, by Saturday again, that jet stream is let go and continuing out that direction, as the low pressure system continues to decrease over time. So for the rest of the week, because of the weak jet stream, tornadoes are likely going to be very unlikely. But the only days that we could possibly see it because of possibly sufficient wind shear is on Thursday and Friday. But then let's take a look at the overall wind shear with 500 millibars in jet stream in mind. So for the majority of this week, we have very weak wind shear until around that low pressure system gets to this area, that low pressure system right here, around Friday and Thursday. We can see sufficient wind shear throughout New Mexico and even up into Kansas as that low pressure system pulls pulls wind further up north. In which sufficient wind shear for tornadic development again could be possible on Thursday and Friday. However, overall this week, except for Thursday and Friday, tornadoes are likely going to not be all that much of a possibility. So let's actually take a look at the severe weather potential for the Midwest for the rest of this week. So it looks like that we're just going to get rounds of severe weather for much of the Midwest today, and you can see by Friday and Thursday, you can see that low pressure system just dig into the Rockies here and start cyclonically rotating, which is again going to pull deep moisture out of the southern reaches of the Gulf of Mexico and out of Mexico and bring them up north. At some point, we're going to see possibly dew points in the 60s as far up as the Hudson Bay due to this low pressure system. This is also going to allow for increasing instability as the week goes on, but it's still mostly going to stay around the moderates. But we will see the moisture increase. But you can see that that low pressure system rotating, and it is expected to bring some rain to Utah, Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, places in the Rockies mainly. But that's really what we're looking at, just rounds of severe weather for the Midwest, as well as, again, that tornado potential on Thursday and Friday. Taking a look at the dew points, let's actually take a look at the increasing moisture for much of this week. You can see as time goes on, as I said, moisture is expected to continue to rise and get as far north as the Hudson Bay, as I mentioned a few seconds ago. But dew points, really deep dew points in the upper 60s in some areas, as well as some spots with dew points in the 70s. But I don't think it's going to be all that likely that we're going to see dew points in the 70s, most likely just in the upper 60s. But again, these rising dew points are likely going to allow for the potential of some increasing instability over time throughout much of this week. And this increasing instability should also influence our hail potential. Taking a look at lapse rates for the rest of this week, lapse rates for the areas affected by severe weather are mostly going to stay the same, as well as also funnel the areas for severe weather with the instability that they bring. Lapse rates are likely going to stay around the same areas as they usually are. However, influence much of the western Midwest with those stronger lapse rates, which is going to allow for some really good instability for hail as well as damaging winds, but again, not so much tornadoes. Taking a look at our instability here, you can notice that around much of the Midwest, the CAPE levels do mostly stay in the moderate levels. They don't reach anywhere all that much in the 3000s, although in some simulated values like tomorrow, it is reaching some low 3000s, which could be possible, but I'm thinking it's pretty unlikely. But overall, for much of this week, CAPE values do mostly stay in the moderates. But then let's take a look at the Thursday and Friday possible tornado threat. You can see, especially on Friday, you can see that CAPE values are expected to be definitely sufficient enough for some tornadic development along with that wind shear. CAPE values that are in the moderates and 2000s down in Texas. However, again, these models are subject to change, but with the sufficient wind shear, as well as the sufficient cape values, we could definitely see some possible tornadoes on Thursday and Friday. Now that I've told you the weather for this week, please go down to the description and check out the socials for Project Gladiator, and hopefully I will see you guys tomorrow with another forecast.